The canoe was named Beaver Dick. I could not make that up if I tried. That is the truth. Eric Andrew Zerba changed his life for Connie Kenny. He quit smoking cigarettes and converted to Lutheranism. In exchange for Eric Zerba's devotion to her, Connie Kenny allowed Eric Andrew Zerba to put his penis inside her vagina. This happened several times before the two were actually married, although it was an act that good Lutherans in Iowa look askance at. After they were married, Eric Andrew Zerba, a non-smoking Lutheran teacher of history, took a position at Ealing's private school, Curtis Crane Lutheran Academy. Eric Andrew Zerba's non-smoking Lutheran Polish seaman created a son named Eric Christopher, who was born in 1989, and a second son named Austin Ansridge, who was born in 1995. This is my history. Totally could have made that. Oh well. A most soothing shower head. You're a good dog, Ingrid, I said. Ingrid curled up beneath my feet. I sat back in the back row of Eden's Theater. Behind us, Robbie Breeze fed the leader strip for Reel 4 of Eden Orientation Series into the toothy cogs of the theater's projector. Then Robbie jumped over the seat back and sat down right next to me, like he always did when we went to movies together. Robbie Breeze put his hand on the armrest, so he was touching me. The final 2 reels of film in Eden Orientation Series contained some of the most horrible things either one of us had ever seen. We lit cigarettes and watched. This is what we found out. McKean Industries worked frantically toward the development of unstoppable weapons and unstoppable soldiers during the second half of the 1960s. McKean Industries wanted to make unstoppable anything. They would have made unstoppable cup of noodles if they could. The scientists who work for Dr. Grady McKean didn't seem to be overly concerned about consequences, like how to stop shit once they made it unstoppable and shit like that. Reel 4 of Eden Orientation Series opened with a headshot of the insane Dr. Grady McKean himself. Dr. Grady McKean sat behind his mahogany desk in what was called Eden's Brain Room, wearing a thin white V-neck t-shirt. I'll bet you anything he wasn't wearing any pants when they filmed that, Robbie said. I'd been thinking exactly the same thing. Dr. Grady McKean rambled on about his projects and bragged about corn and the dissolved balls of Maoist thugs while he smoked a cigarette, and his eyes twitched like a strand of Christmas tree tinsel during a springtime Iowa thunderstorm. Robbie Breeze and I found the brain room later that night. Dr. Grady McKean licked his lips and began, my friends, tell me, are you breeding? Are you? Breed, my friends, breed and love. You are the new humans. It's a lovely place, our Eden, don't you agree? Robbie said, thinking about that guy kind of has a dampening effect on the drive to conjugate. I said, McKean Industries experimented with several methods for creating an unstoppable soldier. Dr. Grady McKean's human replication unit actually grew human body parts that floated in polymer suspensions. The polymer suspensions created their own electrical charges, like jellied batteries. This was where the praying hands, the penis, and the little 2-headed boy came from. They were all created from Dr. Grady McKean's own tissue samples. So each jar actually was Dr. Grady McKean, more or less. Apparently all of the things inside the jars filled with electrical polymers were more or less alive, too, according to Dr. Grady McKean. More or less. Johnny McKean didn't know anything about the somewhat living penis, hands, and baby boy he'd been keeping inside his office from attic to cellar consignment store. Dr. Grady McKean had been a sick monster. Well, he did develop a most soothing shower head, Robbie pointed out. I'll give him that. There's nothing quite like showering beneath a pulse-o-matic shower head, I agreed. I could not help but feel sad about the poor little boy with 2 heads. I really did see his hand move that day when I was alone in Downing McKean's office. The two-headed boy had been imprisoned within that glass container, more or less alive, for over 40 years. But the man's head in the jar came from something else entirely. We found that out in Reel 5. The Human Replication Unit at McKeon Industries also collected and experimented with sperm. Dr. Grady McKeon had no apparent difficulty obtaining sperm samples from very powerful and important American men. Dr. Grady McKeon's power sperm had been frozen and stored in a cryogenic vault inside Eden's brain room. It was exactly like Eden 5. On the door of the freezer vault were framed photographs of men, including President Richard Nixon, Vice President Spiro Agnew, the Director of Central Intelligence Agency, whose real name was Richard Helms, and, of course, Dr. Grady McKeon. Each of them had donated multiple samples of their unstoppable sperm. The unstoppable sperm was intended as the beginning of a new universe. Robbie said, I said, this place is really full of sperm, Robbie. Dr. Grady McKeon explained that the vault full of unstoppable sperm was a precaution. What if, he postulated, only women managed to escape the Eden Project, or if there was a depletion of desirability among male breeders? Dr. Grady McKeon confidentially answered his hypothetical question. Unstoppable sperm would become the genetic seed bank for the new universe. It was most likely something that Dr. Grady McKeon had intended all along. Much later, in conducting further analysis inside the brain room and through reading Dr. Grady McKeon's barely legible ranting diaries, I did discover in 1975 McKeon thawed out the sperm from CIA Director Richard Helms, President Richard Nixon, and Vice President Spiro Agnew. Dr. Grady McKeon discarded that sperm unceremoniously into his prized Nightingale urinal. Dr. Grady McKeon replaced the unstoppable sperm with his own. The brain room was pretty much full of Dr. Grady McKeon's sperm. From the unstoppable sperm experiments, Reel 4 jumped across the McKeon Industries complex to the unstoppable corn unit, where a series of catastrophic accidents of nature sprang up like milkweed in well-watered fields of Iowa corn. Infinitimilities. Melites? Here was Reel 5. Felix Cezerba was the first unstoppable soldier. The end of the world began in Ealing, Iowa in 1968. Nobody knew anything about it. The scientists at McKeon Industries were crazy and drunk on money. Dr. Grady McKeon would have done anything to be the man responsible for creating an unstoppable force in the universe. He nearly got away with it, too. Initially, there were 5 people infected by Dr. Grady McKeon's 412E, 3 scientists and 2 secretaries. The 5 victims made a mess of McKeon Industries in 1968. They were unstoppable soldiers. All they wanted to do was fuck and eat. Because McKeon Industries maintained such extreme levels of security during the Cold War, the unstoppable soldiers that had been accidentally created there never got a chance to step outside into the Iowa daylight. If they'd ever gotten outside, the world would have certainly come to an end, and there would have been a new apex agency in charge of planet Earth, one that only wanted to fuck and eat. Besides fucking and eating, a few of us human beings are driven to paint on walls of caves. Other than that, and the fact that we die relatively easy when you shoot at us, I think human beings are very much like Dr. Grady McKeon's unstoppable soldiers. Infinitimilities. Despite images of all the dead people inside the lab building, the destruction of an entire research wing of the facility, and shit like that, Dr. Grady McKeon's voice had a gleeful chime in it as he narrated over grainy black and white surveillance footage of beasts, while cameras caught them unreservedly engaged in the 2 things the unstoppable soldiers liked to do. There were several unfortunate clips of the unstoppable soldiers eating a few of their co-workers, but what can you do? It was all in the name of science and anti-communism. A commercial had been spliced directly into the middle of Reel 5. The commercial was a sales pitch to the Defense Department for McKeon Industries' unstoppable soldiers. It suggested exposing prison inmates, the unemployed, welfare recipients, and hippies to 412E, and dropping them off in sunny Havana or possibly deep inside Red China. Bulletproof, tireless machines of conquest, McKean Industries presents to the world our unstoppable soldiers. The commercial footage kept replaying the image of Felix Zerba in the process of hatching out. As soon as an unstoppable soldier hatches out, he's a bit puffy and wilted, kind of like a butterfly when it sheds its husk of chrysalis. But as soon as the unstoppable soldiers ate what remained of Felix Zerba's corpse, it also ate 2 attending nurses and a physician. All of this was captured on camera. Bulletproof, tireless machines of conquest, McKean Industries presents to the world our unstoppable soldiers. The unstoppable soldier that hatched out of Felix Zerba ate the cameraman too. Apparently, the scientists at McKean Industries did not have any idea for what to do about the unstoppable soldiers that had taken over their unstoppable corn research unit. They only knew that they wanted to sell the unstoppable soldiers and that they were unsuccessful at shooting them. So the leaders of McKean Industries did the worst possible thing you could do to an unstoppable soldier infestation. They waited to see if the unstoppable soldiers would simply die or go away on their own. Unstoppable soldiers do not just go away. Unstoppable soldiers can live a very long time between meals. McKean Industries eventually learned these 2 details. Unfortunately, for an entire crew of McKean Industries scientists, they also learned that unstoppable soldiers were bulletproof. Dr. Grady McKean narrated. In the spring of 1968, tireless scientists in McKean labs kept round-the-clock vigil on our formidable troops, observing carefully while the burgeoning females deposited egg masses as large as high school basketball courts. Imagine the reproductive and growth potential of such an army, my friends. Robbie said, those eggs look exactly like the shit inside the globes. He was right. The 3rd stage of the infestation of the unstoppable soldiers, the breeding and egg-laying phase, reverted back in appearance to the original black, pulsing, and cauliflowered mass of 412E mold, but on a much grander scale. Like the contained mold specimen Robbie and I first saw inside Johnny McKean's office the night we climbed down the roof access ladder and into from attic to cellar consignment store, the egg masses laid by the 2 female unstoppable soldiers quivered, writhed, radiating in an obviously powerful light. The egg masses swelled with small volcanic bulges that would rise up and spit globules snot-like eruptions, only to be reabsorbed in the pulsating blob. And the female unstoppable soldiers never moved from their guardian positions over their rookeries. They stayed with their spiked arms spring-loaded, just waiting for anything to get near enough to become the next meal. Dr. Grady McKean appeared once again in the role of on-screen narrator before the end of Reel 5. Dr. Grady McKean had aged considerably between the filming of the first reels and the reel that showed the siege of the unstoppable soldiers. His hair was thinner, and beneath the thick distortion of Dr. Grady McKean's eyeglasses, his eye twitch fired and fired like an inexhaustible machine pistol. Dr. Grady McKean said, "It was merely by blind chance, my friends, that we at McKean Industries ultimately discovered the secret to demobilizing our unstoppable soldiers. Pay attention, my friends, for you may be able to effect a similar salvation if the conditions are favorable in your situation. If not, then take heart. Enjoy your lives here in Eden, and by all means, breed, my friends. Breed and live in love. The new universe depends on your success. I love you. I do love you all." Then Dr. Grady McKean began to weep on camera. Robbie said, "He is fucking insane." I said, let's have another cigarette. Scientists at the lab dared to enter the sealed-off unstoppable corn unit where the eggs had been laid. Dr. Grady McKeon scientists formed an armed phalanx in their Eden jumpsuits. Dr. Grady McKeon himself led the entry of the scientist army into the secure laboratory. Dr. Grady McKeon and his scientists were armed with flamethrowers. History provides a compelling argument that every scientist who tinkers around with unstoppable shit needs a reliable flamethrower. When Dr. Grady McKeon entered the lab, however, the unstoppable soldiers reacted to him in exactly the same manner I had seen Hungry Jack respond to Robbie. The unstoppable soldiers were afraid of Dr. Grady McKeon. They tried to get away from him. Dr. Grady McKeon was clearly the god of unstoppable soldiers. So McKeon Industries reasoned that since Dr. Grady McKeon had brought the unstoppable soldiers into being, it was he that could erase their existence as well. So they experimented. The notable characteristics of McKeon Industries' experimentation entitled two prominent features. First, scientists working alongside Dr. Grady McKeon seemed to have no logical expectation for any particular outcome. They simply randomly selected any convenient biological agents and threw them into the paint cans of their soup kettle. Second, for whatever reasons, the McKeon Industries labs seemed a bit overly obsessed with blood or sperm as their default catalyst. Okay. Night.